You're listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, brought to you by Global Convenience Store Focus, featuring senior retail executives and experts in the global convenience, fuels, and mobility retail industry. Welcome to the Future of Convenience podcast. I'm Carolyn Schnare, and I'm joined by my co-host today, Harry Milloff, who is the CEO of the Mosley Group. Hey, Harry.
Hey, Carolyn. How are you?
I'm doing great. Little cold over here, but staying warm and happy to have you warming my heart and joining me today. Before we get started, I want to tell you about a Dan Day refrigeration. Ready to revolutionize your convenience store kitchen? Look no further than a Dan Day refrigeration. With a Dan Day's innovative patented technology, you'll enjoy a dramatic reduction in energy consumption compared to traditional refrigeration units. A Dan Day drawers offer large capacity and stackability, allowing you to optimize every inch of your storage area and maintain consistent, precise temperatures. Choose a Dan Day refrigeration for unmatched efficiency and performance made for your convenience. Visit danday.com to learn more. So Harry was a guest on our show a few months ago, and we had a great conversation about unlocking the potential of food service and the keys to operating food programs efficiently. Really cool episode. Dig back if you didn't listen. But growing food service in the convenience industry is important and around the world. And it's a rapidly changing industry. And Harry's an expert in this area with a huge portfolio of convenience, QSR, restaurant companies, again, blessed by greatness right here. And he's worked with plenty of these companies. He's advised them. He knows everything. So I'm really happy to have him here to co-host a series of episodes devoted to food service. So Harry, I'm really looking forward to today's guest. Can you tell us who's with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with Jordan over the past year, and I'm really excited to introduce him. Jordan Cusner, former head of guest insights for Popeyes Louisiana Kitchen. Jordan, you might be asking yourself, why did Harry ask me to join a podcast that focuses on convenience stores? And it's really interesting. As Carolyn was saying, over the last 2 decades and increasingly over the last 5 years, convenience stores have been going through a complete evolution. You look at the kind of typical core segments of convenience, and it's petroleum and tobacco and lottery, and these are all declining fields today. And so it's really caused a heightened level of focus towards food service, how to deliver food like a QSR, really thinking about convenience. And throughout my experience working with convenience store operators and leaders, there's always this kind of aspirational look towards QSRs and some of the top performing QSRs. And so, I think that there's just so much that we can learn from you and from this conversation. So I just really thank you so much for joining us, and excited to tap in today.
Thank you, Harry. The question I had is, what took you so long to invite me to be on the Future of Convenience podcast? But really excited to be here. Happy to have this discussion.
This is, as Carolyn said, this is my second time, on the show, and really excited. This will be my first of 6 over the next few months that are focused purely on the topic of foodvenience. So really that, bringing in all elements of convenience with food service and how do they work together. And, today, as you really focused much of your career on guest insights, it's something that in my work with restaurants and QSRs, we lean into guest insights across so many different initiatives. And it's just so important with food service operations to know your customer and really understand, what makes them tick and how we can start to serve them in the best ways. And so I guess just to jump right into things, I'm curious, as, a leader in the QSR segment globally at Popeyes and other roles that you've served, do you think about the different ways that you would address convenience at a QSR? And, is convenience important to QSR customers today based on your learnings?
Absolutely. So you think about QSR, stands for quick service, right? So from the drop, we know that the interaction we have with our guests, the way they interact with our restaurant, the way they order their food, how quickly they are served that food is of prime importance. People come to our restaurants often in between 2 other activities, work, going back to work, picking up their kids from school, running to soccer practice. The idea that the food has to be, hot and ready to serve and have a really easy, convenient experience for our guests, that's table stakes in our industry. So it's something we think about a lot. We know that there are certain consumers or certain need states for whom and for which convenience is even a bigger deal than someone maybe who's coming to one of our restaurants to sit back and relax and enjoy the flavors and enjoy the cuisine, so to speak, or the indulge themselves is probably a better word. But there's a large cohort of people that are coming in, and that is the reason they are coming to us instead of a different restaurant or instead of making food for themselves at home.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that and all the different components that go into QSR operations and how it focuses towards convenience for the customer. What do you think about how someone's actually accessing the food? Do you ever ask your guests about things, how they pick it up, or how they might get it delivered, or how they might access the menu and place orders and things like that? Does that also play into the thinking?
Yeah. So very broad question. Let me see if I can pick it apart. So I think in the last couple of years, and certainly in the post-COVID era, the way our guests interact with QSR has changed rapidly, right? So I think third-party delivery and delivery in general is a much larger part of the portfolio, and it's going to continue to grow. So on the one hand, yes, we're always thinking about how do our guests interact with the menu? How do our guests interact with the restaurant? How do our guests interact with the food? What does the packaging look like? And then now it's compounded by the complexity of recognizing that a lot of our guests are coming to us through a third party that we have a little bit less control over. But I think that is a very, very big part of how people think about our restaurant. If someone is ordering Popeyes through Uber Eats or DoorDash or Grubhub, then that becomes kind of the portal to the restaurant. And we need to make sure that we're showing up in a way that's consistent with our brand, in a way that's delivering against whatever their expectations are for that experience, making it seamless and easy. I think, we're talking about convenience now, but I think 5 or 10 years ago, the buzzword was frictionless and making sure everything was frictionless for our guests. I think there's an element of that inconvenience as well. And that's certainly a part of how we think about QSR. I know the work we've done together, Harry, has been thinking about the menu experience and how people order from that menu, making sure that the food is presented obviously in an appetizing way. That's kind of, table stakes also, but how do we design the menu to allow our guests to explore, but also seamlessly work their way through that menu and figure out what they want in a quick way? Because, interestingly, there's a lot of pressure for our guests and for everyone's guests, knowing that there's somebody behind them in the drive-thru, somebody behind them in line. People get into line and they're like, oh, I don't know what I want. And then that creates a little bit of stress and anxiety for our guests. We want to alleviate that stress. But we also want to make it really easy for them to kind of jump in and tell us what they want.
Well, and to that point too, I mean, we change the words every other day, frictionless, blah, 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 like offline to online. I don't even know what we're calling it today, but going from mobile ordering to picking up in store to mobile order to pick up in the drive-through versus getting out of your car versus carry out, all those things. But there's so many touch points. And I have to imagine, like using my own personal example, ordering on my phone, picking up in the drive-through because it's too hot. I don't want to get out of the car. Do I go in the store? Do they know I'm here? How do they know what car am I in? I don't remember. And it not stressing the consumer. And I think I use probably every touch point within a matter of a week in the same store, using different apps or showing up in store and doing things like that. Like, how do you put it all together to make sure everything matches?
So first of all, really big challenge naturally, but taking one step back, you talked about how you are using every single touch point. I think that's what we're seeing also, is that these touch points are not for a particular consumer. It's for a particular need state or occasion. And so the notion that, I think the notion that we were building, channel A for person one and channel B for person two, I think that has kind of gone out the window. And now we're thinking, to your point, the importance of having it feel and look holistic and look branded and feel branded across the entire spectrum is really, really important. How do we do that? So I think for us, and this is kind of the journey we've been on with Harry and with others, is recognizing that that although the people that are coming to these different channels or coming through these different channels are varied, there are certain need states and occasions for which they're coming to those channels. So how do we identify what the most important table stakes are for every one of those different modalities, and making sure that we're designing it for that occasion? So one maybe silly example is your app is for maybe your most loyal guests. Maybe they're deal driven, they're offer driven. So, and they kind of know what they want. Okay, so we can kind of figure out what that experience needs to look like. But there are people that come onto our website to order food as well. They're probably newer guests who are less savvy, don't know about the brand, don't know about the menu. I think historically, those two experiences were kind of very similar in that we thought of them as like, these are digital channels for people to come to our brand. When in fact, one of them is more of a loyal guest and one of them is more of an acquisition channel. And therefore, the offers you might be serving up online might need to look very different than the offers you're serving up on your app, where you're talking to a guest that has been there 2 or 3 or 4 times already, whereas on the website, it's very different. So I think it's about understanding the need state and the profile a little bit of who's coming, recognizing that, as a loyal Popeyes guest, I use the app a ton. I also use the website. And in fact, I just used it the other day when I was making a really large order. And I thought, man, it's going to be easier to do this on the web versus like with my thumbs. So you can't kind of lose the nuance of like what makes people really, what drives the engagement with your digital app in the website or the online experience, because you're going to have some of that crossover, but recognizing that you're designing for a different occasion was really important.
Totally makes sense.
I love this. I love just how deep we're getting right now into the psyche of QSR consumers, and it's interesting when we start talking about the convenience sector. There's a huge spectrum out there today. There's convenience stores today that have zero food service. There's stores out there today that have a roller grill and a microwave. And that kind of really more of that gas station food, quote unquote. And then you go to the other side and there's concepts like we were just featuring on a recent competition around foodvenience, the best foodvenience store in the world, that companies like Apple Green and others that are really full kitchens, there's full restaurants, it's all to the level where it's Uber Eats, third party delivery. People are looking at these convenience stores as food destinations, and across the board within the convenience sector, though, I feel at least there's less attention towards consumer insights and into really picking back what that consumer is looking for, what are the different segments of customers, how do they attack them with different food service strategies. And I'm just curious, how do you capture insights as a leader in the QSR space? What are the different tools that you use? Just how do we gain the insight from the customers?
Well, first of all, I love a roller grill, so that's a good insight right there. When I walk in and I see that going, I'm happy. And
you and me both.
Yeah, good. It's funny, you think about like the convenience store. I think, and I'm not in that space, so I don't know exactly how they think about and develop their food offerings. But it's probably a little bit more of low-hanging fruit relative to obviously it being my bread and butter. So there's probably a very different way they think about what that occasion or need looks like in their space. But for us, we do across QSR, I'm not even speaking specifically about any particular brand, we do it all. So we're thinking long term, how do people think about our brand? What is it that makes our brand tick? How does our brand sit relative to the competitive set in the broader QSR or even beyond QSR, fast casual or restaurant space generally? So understanding, what are the drivers of engagement more broadly, and then where do we have opportunity to really lean in and be unique as a brand? So that's kind of like your brand tracking, your brand equity types of exercises. So that's kind of like, long-term, online quantitative types of exercises. We're also sending secret shoppers to the restaurants. So regular people that we engage with to go into the restaurants, often tied to a particular market test. So we're launching a new LTO, limited time offering, and we maybe have it in a smaller market. We're trying to make sure the operations work effectively before we roll it out nationally. We'll send guests to those restaurants, not exactly, but like with a clipboard in hand and taking pictures of the food and letting us know how it was served and whether they liked it and where there might be opportunities. And we learned a lot from that. And there was one particular sandwich that we launched that didn't really work right away. And we were able to look back at the mystery shopping data and recognize, there was an issue. We weren't putting enough sauce on these sandwiches because the nozzle that we shipped out to the restaurants was different than the nozzle we used in the test kitchen. There were more little divots or what have you, holes, if you will, in the top of the nozzle. Oh no, we need to tell our operations people to squeeze twice as much. So little things like that we pick up on by having people in the restaurant. Obviously, we go ourselves, the marketers, when they're launching their own sandwiches or their own LTOs. that's their baby. And we need to make sure that it's being executed the way it should be, that it delivers against whatever our brand promise is, thinking about our brand equity, but also how are we talking about this particular launch in our communications? If we're saying this is the crunchiest, spiciest sandwich you've ever had, we need to make sure that it really lives up to that. And then everything in between, one big part of that obviously is the innovation pipeline or the innovation cycle that we have. So coming up with ideas, finding those opportunities where we think we can lean in. What are those, we call them jobs to be done, right? So what are the things that our guests are looking for us to do, either in QSR generally or with our particular brand? How do we identify a new way to kind of unlock that? So if someone's looking for a flavor experience, or they want to try new cuisine, or they want to get an exploration, I think, during COVID, a lot of the guests that used to go out a ton and weren't able to do that, they started cooking more at home, and they were trying to be more experimental. And they were thinking, well, I love, Vietnamese pho. I can't go get it now, so I'm going to kind of explore in my home. Or I love to travel. I can't get to Vietnam. I'm going to make that food at home. So I think thinking about how people approach the restaurant and how we can deliver those different occasions for them in our context, right? That's that job, right? So the job to be done is flavor exploration. And we carry that through that process. So we build a concept that delivers against that. We go to our taste testing lab, and we actually serve it up to our guests. We get feedback from them to understand, is this food delivering against whatever that job is? In this case, maybe it's flavor exploration. And then carry that through to our comms. Are we able to effectively communicate what really makes this particular LTO hum and why people should be excited about it? And is it going to drive them to the restaurant to try it? In the case of an LTO, you need to drive, guests and traffic to come to the restaurant and try it. And ideally, they'll come back and try something else, or try that sandwich again, or tell their friends about it. So I hope that answered your question, Harry. But again, it's like you think about the spectrum of like thinking big picture about your brand, but also having people in the restaurant to experience the food as it's coming off the grill.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And, I really like your story just around the sandwich and, how it was a home run in the test kitchen. You bring it out to stores, doesn't perform so well. And, interviewing customers and starting to get that feedback, it's a little nuance. It's the amount of sauce that was, put on in the nozzles on the dispenser. And, it reminds me of some assignments that we've taken on one of the largest QSR chains in Saudi Arabia. And we had developed this kind of transformational, new brand image, new menu, new operating system that was quite impactful. And we started to present it in focus groups to customers and some of their, core demographics and core followers. And the first round of focus groups that we did, we had tweaked the logo a bit, and we had actually removed one of the icons that was on a logo that felt, from our perspective, it was dated, and we wanted to modernize it, change the font, things like that. And whoa, did we get pushback. I mean, the guests were saying that this was not the concept. This is not what, you never do this. This was awful, all these things. And we started to really unpack it. And it was really about that little icon, on the logo. And so we did another round of focus groups. We brought the icon back, this little nuance, and had a whole new round. And it was a complete 360. Everyone was saying, to the extent that, they would want to bring their fiance there, for, a date night, and it would be a whole new day, for this brand. And so it's amazing just how in the office you can be talking about some brilliant ideas. You can taste things. You can really, bring all the strategy and all the rationale, but until you get that customer voice and really start to listen and internalize it, it really just gets it past the finish line, in so many ways. And sometimes it gets down to those nitty-gritty details.
I really agree. And I think in the QSR space, and food generally is a level of complexity that I think people don't appreciate. So I wanted to just touch on that for a second. So I can tell you a quick story. We had a CPG product that we optimized, made it so much better. And exactly like you described, it fell off. Nobody wanted it. And we realized that we hadn't tested it with our core users. This is a stock and broth brand from a different life. And so we thought we had nailed it. Our core guests, our most loyal guests, noticed that difference, didn't like it. And so the importance of making sure that you're carrying that through and getting that feedback early and often is hugely important. And what's interesting about QSR is that every sandwich that anybody eats, or any food item that anybody eats, I am sure was the best thing anybody had in the corporate office. But the complexity of making it work in the operational context can't be overlooked. And I think that was one of the big learnings for me when I came from CPG to QSR, is that so much can go wrong. And wrong is not even, there's no pejorative. It's just, you're talking about in a restaurant like ours, 5,000 restaurants with 10,000 people making the food, and there's people in line. And so where the rubber meets the road is in those restaurants. And we need to think through that complexity when we're developing these concepts, recognizing that it needs to scale, that it needs to be able to be delivered in a hectic rush hour, lunch rush context in the restaurant. And so, you talked about your Saudi Arabian brand. There's no shame in like the team thinking we've got lightning in a bottle, but you need to make sure that your core guests, like your consumers in Saudi Arabia, are not going to be resistant to that, and that B, we can actually make it happen in the restaurants. And that's probably unique for the food industry, that you're really making this anew every single day. In a CPG context, you're manufacturing, you're shipping it out through distribution centers. In a restaurant, you're making it every day. Is that even possible given the complexity of what they're already doing back of house, and maybe how complex this particular build might be?
And everybody has a camera, and everybody has instant feedback, and everybody can post on Google Maps or Google Feedback or TikTok sometimes to say like, hey, guess what? This doesn't look like this. This doesn't taste like this, and so you not only do you have to have it right, like sometimes you have to have it right every time, because you never know which fussy person's going to post it somewhere.
Yeah, incredibly true. And luckily we try to think about and leverage that to our advantage, right? So we know that people are going to post and tweet. How do we connect with those, power users, those influencers early in the process? How do we make sure that it's really, really exciting and appetizing, and that we're not out over our skis and trying to deliver a sandwich that really can't be executed? So yeah, completely agree, Carolyn.
Another topic that we cover a lot on in the convenience segment is around trust, and customers being able to trust that this food is going to be good, that it's going to be quality, that you're going to have a clean experience. It's a challenge in a lot of convenience stores, because there's a preconceived notion of fuel and tobacco, and they don't always match with quality food. And, that's not the same, issues or barriers that you run into in the QSR industry. But I would think that customer trust is something that is pretty important. And I'm curious, is trust something that you think about, in terms of the customer's relationship with brand? And how do you quantify it, or how do you really understand it in your role?
Yeah, so absolutely. It's a somewhat vague term, but we measure that and track it and think about how to unpack it and what it means. Like, is this a brand I trust? And especially, for chicken, you're talking about raw chicken being shipped to the restaurants, being handled and made, not exactly to order, but fresh every day for our guests. There's an element of trust that you're inherently placing into those people back of house, that you're not going to get sick from this food, and that it's going to be, beyond not being sick, that it's going to be delicious and crunchy and great every single time. I think about in the QSR space, one of the marketing axioms that we talk about a lot generally is you want to surprise and delight your guests. Well, we heard from our guests, we don't want to be surprised. We come to the restaurant, we know what you do. We come because we love that. And when I hear surprise in the QSR space, that's not a good thing. And, Carolyn, you talked about people on TikTok tweeting out the bad food they may have gotten at a different restaurant. I think there's an element of like, hey, let's keep this simple. Let's keep it consistent. People don't want to be surprised. They come to us because they know exactly what they want. Sure, there's a couple people that are showing up to explore. It's their first time, but a lot of people are loyal guests. You think about, one of the behemoths in the category, McDonald's. I don't remember the exact numbers, and they're not my data, so I can make it up, I guess. But it's something like 85% of the U.S. population eats at McDonald's once a quarter, right? So everybody knows what they're going to get from this experience. Maybe it's 85% once a year, whatever. It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. At some point in some recent memory, You've been to a McDonald's.
Correct. And so they're coming to McDonald's, or they're coming to Popeyes or Burger King because they know what to expect, and because we've built that relationship. Thinking about Burger King and even Popeyes, 52 or 53 or 54 years old as a brand, and to get from a small local chain that was born in Louisiana and now is spread globally. We have restaurants all over the world. That is because we have established a relationship with our guests. They know what we stand for. When we open up a restaurant in Abu Dhabi, which I think we did recently, there's a certain element of trust. They know what to expect. It's going to be the best fried chicken they've ever had, and they know that they can come to the restaurant and have a great meal. And I think that's part of that trust equation that you were talking about.
Well, that I couldn't have even ended on a better note on that, and just how to really keep your customers top of mind for sure, but then also keeping them throughout the entire process, from marketing to operations to everything else. And so, Jordan, I've learned so much from you today. That was really cool. Thank you for sharing everything, and Harry, you as well for adding so much context to it and the convenience as well.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Carolyn.
My pleasure. Happy to be here. Thank you, guys.
Well, again, thank you for being here with me. I look forward to our next foodvenience show in just a few more weeks, Harry. And assuming to my listeners, you've loved this episode on the show as well, please take a moment to hit that 5th star on the rating and leave us a glowing review as well if you'd be so inclined. Be sure to follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you can hear every time one of our brand new episodes drops. And thank you so much for listening to The Future of Convenience. You've been listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, produced by Dan Munford, Nick Scherzer, Jenna Ferguson, and Lorraine Evans. It is produced, edited, and mixed by Carolyn Schnare, and music is provided by Jukebox Music. Learn more at globalconveniencestorefocus.co.uk.